You know, the human liver is arguably the closest thing we have to a biological superhero.
Oh, absolutely. It really is.
I mean, think about it. It is the only internal organ we possess that can regenerate itself completely. Like, even if you remove up to 75% of its mass,
It just grows right back.
right, it is a total regenerative powerhouse. Yet, despite that incredible resilience, a staggering number of people are walking around right now with the condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
And, they're completely unaware that their body's ultimate filter is essentially just choking on excess fat.
It is a silent epidemic, quite literally.
Yeah.
I mean, the liver doesn't have pain receptors in the same way other organs do.
Wow, really? So you wouldn't even feel it?
No, not at all. So by the time someone actually feels symptoms or a doctor flags elevated liver enzymes on a routine blood test.
It's already been happening for a while.
Exactly. That fat accumulation has been building up quietly for years.
And that diagnosis is usually the exact moment the panic sets in. I mean, imagine you get that news from your doctor and suddenly you're on a mission.
Oh, for sure. You want to fix it immediately.
Right. So you walk into a massive grocery store and you're looking for the liver health aisle because you need to fix your diet. But instead of finding one clear, well-lit path, you walk in and there are 50 different aisles just screaming at you.
All contradicting each other.
Yes, one neon sign flashes 0 carbs. The next one over says only plants. Another is a giant billboard yelling, cut all the fat.
And you just freeze.
You just stand there, completely frozen, totally overwhelmed by the noise. Half the time, you end up walking out of the store with the exact same foods you've always eaten because the paralysis is just too intense.
Yeah, it's decision fatigue at its worst.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a machete to that exact grocery store panic. We are looking at a highly concise, incredibly direct body of medical data designed to solve this massive dietary confusion around fatty liver.
We are throwing out the noise and focusing purely on the signal.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the fundamental problem highlighted in the research isn't a lack of dietary options. We actually suffer from the exact opposite.
Too many options.
Way too much advice and absolutely zero clarity. And, that lack of clarity breeds a very destructive behavioral loop.
Oh, the diet hopping.
Right. It leads directly to a cycle where people try everything. They do keto on Monday, vegan on
A
Thursday.
juice cleanse over the weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they stick to absolutely nothing. They bounce from one extreme protocol to another, which means they never give their liver the sustained metabolic window it needs to utilize that regenerative superpower you mentioned.
Okay, let's unpack this because the primary goal of our deep dive today is to analyze the actual solution the data provides. And the solution is remarkably anti-trend.
Very anti-trend.
We are going to examine the only 2 evidence-based frameworks you actually need to understand. And more importantly, we're going to explore the underlying biology of why, when it comes to reversing a fatty liver, mundane consistency will always beat flawless perfection.
Yeah, that word perfection is the absolute trap here.
Mm-hmm.
The literature we're looking at demands a major psychological reframe right out of the gate.
Yeah.
We have to completely abandon the pursuit of the perfect diet.
Because it doesn't exist.
Right. The assumption that there is one magical, mathematically flawless combination of macronutrients that will instantly cure a fatty liver. That is the exact illusion keeping people trapped in that cycle of quitting.
It makes me think of how we consume media nowadays. It's like endlessly scrolling through a streaming service on a Friday night.
Oh, I do that all the time.
We all do. You spend an hour looking for the absolute flawless, perfect movie to watch. You're cross-referencing reviews, watching trailers.
Checking the run times to make sure it's not too long.
Exactly. And eventually you're so exhausted by the cognitive load of making a choice that you just turn off the TV and go to sleep. Diet hopping is the exact same behavioral pattern. You exhaust your willpower just trying to pick a lane.
That is a brilliant comparison.
But I have to ask, is the problem really just a lack of clarity in the medical space? Or are we biologically wired to quit when a dietary protocol gets too complicated?
Well, they definitely feed into each other, but the biological drive to conserve energy is massive. When a diet is overly complicated, it requires a huge amount of daily cognitive load.
Just to figure out what to eat.
Right. If every single meal becomes a complex math equation where you're weighing almonds and, tracking macros on an app.
Your brain just says, nope.
Exactly. Your brain flags that as an unnecessary expenditure of energy. The core thesis of our material today is that reversing conditions like fatty liver isn't about finding a secret superfood. It's about locking into a solid, evidence-based approach and completely removing that mental fatigue. When you stop waking up and asking, wait, what diet am I on today?
Yeah.
You free up the mental bandwidth actually needed to just do the work.
So if the mental fatigue is the real enemy here, what does a clear zero fatigue dietary framework actually look like in practice?
Well, the data presents two highly viable options.
Let's look at the first one. Framework A, the whole food, lower carb approach.
Yeah, this is a metabolic powerhouse of a strategy.
Mm.
But to understand it, we need to look at exactly what is being removed, what is being added, and most importantly, why.
So what's on the chopping block first?
In this framework, we are cutting back drastically on sugar, refined carbohydrates, and ultra-processed foods.
I mean, I know a lot of our listeners are highly informed and already know that donuts and sodas are bad for them. But the research gets very specific about who this lower carb framework is built for. It points out that this approach works exceptionally well if you are someone dealing with insulin resistance. Why is that? Like, what is the actual mechanism happening in the liver when someone is insulin resistant?
To understand that, we need to talk about a physiological process called de novo lipogenesis.
De novo lipogenesis. Okay, what does that mean?
Literally translated, it means making new fat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you consume refined carbohydrates and sugar, your body breaks them down into glucose. Insulin is the hormone responsible for ushering that glucose out of your blood and into your cells for energy.
Right, unlocks the cells.
Exactly. But when you are insulin resistant, your cells stop responding to the knock on the door. The glucose stays in the blood, the body panics and pumps out even more insulin, and eventually all that excess glucose gets shunted directly to the liver.
I'm trying to picture this. It's almost like, well, it's like the liver is the baggage carousel at a really busy airport.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Right. So the liver is the carousel and the carbohydrates are the bags. Normally, bags arrive, passengers pick them up, and they leave the airport. That's the glucose being burned for energy.
Exactly. But when you eat a massive amount of refined carbs,
It's like 5 jumbo jets landing at once.
yes, the bags are flooding the carousel faster than they can be picked up. The belt jams.
And the airport staff, which would be the insulin, starts panicking because bags are spilling everywhere.
Right. So what do? They start shoving all those excess bags into the airport's utility closets just to clear the floor.
Wait, so the utility closets?
The cells of your liver. The liver takes all that excess glucose, converts it into triglycerides, which is fat, and packs it away inside its own tissue.
Wow.
That is how a liver becomes fatty. It's an emergency storage mechanism.
So when the research talks about turning off the fat-creating substrates, it's literally just talking about stopping the flood of bags at the airport.
Precisely. A substrate is just the raw material used in a chemical reaction. In this case, refined carbohydrates and sugars are the substrate, the raw materials that your liver uses to manufacture fat.
So you just cut the supply.
Exactly. By drastically lowering your intake of those carbs, you stop supplying the raw material, you stabilize your blood sugar, insulin levels drop, and the liver can finally start pulling those bags out of the utility closets and burning them off.
Okay, so what are we actually eating then?
What's fascinating here is how much you get to add back in. You are replacing those carb calories with high-quality proteins.
Specific examples.
We're talking eggs, wild-caught fish, poultry, maybe some lean grass-fed beef. And you pair that with healthy fats.
Like avocados.
Avocados, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, especially walnuts and macadamias, and plenty of fibrous vegetables like spinach, broccoli, and cauliflower.
That is the massive upside of Framework A. It can quickly reduce liver fat and stabilize your blood sugar.
It really can.
But the data doesn't sugarcoat the downside here. This approach is notoriously brutal to sustain, especially in the first couple of weeks.
It is, because you are dealing with physiological withdrawal.
Real withdrawal.
Absolutely. Your brain and your body have become highly habituated to those quick hits of easily accessible glucose. When you cut off that supply, your body essentially throws a tantrum.
Right, the keto flu, right.
Basically, yeah. You experience lethargy, intense cravings, brain fog. It is a highly vulnerable window where the friction of the diet is at its absolute peak.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If those first few weeks are an absolute gauntlet of cravings and tantrums, how does anyone actually survive that adaptation phase without giving up and running straight back to the ultra-processed foods?
By leaning heavily into the protein and fat we just talked about. You aren't just removing carbs and starving.
Right.
Protein and fat are incredibly satiating. They digest slowly and provide a steady, flatline release of energy rather than a massive spike and crash.
So you actually stay full.
Exactly. If you eat enough of these whole foods, the cravings for the refined sugars naturally subside because your body realizes it isn't starving, it's just running on a different, more stable fuel source.
I hear that, but I also know human nature.
Yeah.
Someone might listen to that breakdown, recognize their own habits, and say, you know what? I can't do it. The idea of carb withdrawal, the strictness of cutting out so much of what I normally eat, I know myself, and I will fail that protocol.
And that is a very valid concern.
Right, that friction is entirely valid, so we naturally pivot to the alternative. If framework A is off the table, the data provides framework B, the whole food plant predominant approach.
Yes, and we have to highlight a massive caveat from the research right off the bat. This approach is not about becoming a dogmatic, flawless vegan.
I love how the text frames this. It's not an on-off switch.
Ah.
I like to think of the plant-predominant diet like a volume dial on a stereo.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
You don't have to unplug the machine and rewire your entire identity. You just gently turn the dial up on the plants.
Right. We are talking massive amounts of vegetables, whole fruits, legumes like lentils and chickpeas.
Intact whole grains like oats and quinoa.
Exactly. You turn up the volume on all of that, and you actively turn the volume down on animal products. And specifically, you turn it down on saturated fat.
So that reduction in saturated fat, that's the critical mechanism here.
Let's look at the biology. Saturated fats, which are primarily found in fatty cuts of meat, butter, cheese, and certain tropical oils, have a very rigid molecular structure.
Rigid, like stiff.
Yeah, structurally stiff. Because they are so structurally rigid, when they are processed by the liver, they tend to pack together very tightly inside the liver cells.
Oh, I see.
This tight packing creates a localized inflammatory response known as lipotoxicity.
Wait, lipotoxicity, so it's not just about calories, it's about the physical shape of the fat molecules actually irritating the liver.
Exactly. Whereas the unsaturated fats found in plants like the fats in olive oil or walnuts are structurally flexible.
Because they're liquid at room temperature.
Precisely. And more importantly, they are processed much more cleanly by the liver without triggering that same inflammatory cascade. By shifting to a plant-predominant framework, you are fundamentally changing the type of lipids your liver has to process.
Which gives it a chance to heal.
Exactly.
Let's weigh the pros and cons here, because this sounds incredibly accessible. The upside of Framework B is massive for longevity.
It's highly heart-friendly.
And incredibly rich in dietary fiber, which feeds the gut microbiome and helps pull cholesterol out of the body.
Yes, the fiber is a huge bonus.
But, and looking at the warnings in the text, there is a very modern trap hidden inside this framework. The data explicitly warns that you still have to control refined carbs.
Yeah, you can't just eat unlimited sugar just because it's vegan.
Right. Crucially, you must fiercely avoid ultra-processed plant-based foods. I mean, walk down any grocery aisle today. You see a brightly colored box of highly processed cookies or a frozen microwave meal, and right on the front, in bold green letters, it says plant-based. The instinct is to assume it's a health food that's great for your liver, right?
That is the exact trap, and the food industry relies heavily on it. It's called the health halo effect.
The health halo.
Yeah. Plant-based does not mean whole food. A hyper-processed cookie made with refined white flour, cane sugar, and industrial seed oils might technically be 100% free of animal products.
So it's legally plant-based.
It is plant-based, but metabolically, it is an absolute disaster for a fatty liver. Those refined carbs will still trigger the exact same insulin spike and de novo lipogenesis we talked about earlier.
Oh, so it's just flooding the baggage carousel with different colored bags.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
The downside of Framework B is that it requires high vigilance against modern marketing.
You have to focus relentlessly on the whole food part of the equation.
Right. A black bean burger made from actual black beans and quinoa in your kitchen is great.
But a frozen meatless patty with 35 unpronounceable ingredients is not.
Not at all. The focus must remain on actual legumes, intact whole grains like brown rice, and fresh produce.
So we have these two distinct frameworks laid out. Framework A, lower carb, high in protein and healthy fats, brilliantly designed for insulin resistance, but it requires pushing through a tough withdrawal phase.
Yep.
And then Framework B, plant predominant, high in fiber, low in saturated fat, highly accessible, but requires you to constantly dodge the trap of processed vegan junk food.
That's the summary.
The listener is now standing at a crossroads. How do you actually implement this data What does the roadmap actually look like?
This is where the research delivers its most empowering insight. The big reveal is that both of these diets work.
Wait, really? They both successfully clear fat from the liver?
They both do. When studied in clinical settings, whether a patient achieves a calorie deficit through carbohydrate restriction or through a plant-predominant high-fiber approach, the liver responds by mobilizing stored fat.
Wow.
The ultimate success factor isn't found in the granular macronutrient details. The singular success factor is adherence.
Which brings us directly to the actionable roadmap provided in the text. The data doesn't just hand you two options and wish you luck. It gives you the exact parameters for how to move forward.
Yes, step one of the roadmap is non-negotiable.
You must pick exactly one approach. Lower carb or R, plant predominant. You have to get off the fence and make a choice today.
And once you choose your path, you have to commit to the timeline. The literature outlines a required commitment period of 8 to 12 unbroken weeks.
Okay, we need to explain why 8 weeks is the magic number because I'm sure it's not arbitrary. I was going to ask, why not a 30-day challenge? Everyone loves a quick 30-day challenge.
They do, but biology just operates on its own schedule. It takes time for the liver to downregulate the enzymes responsible for storing fat.
Oh, okay.
And then it has to upregulate the enzymes responsible for burning it. It takes real time to physically mobilize the triglycerides out of the liver cells.
So 30 days just isn't enough time.
No, we are looking for cellular turnover. Over the course of 8 to 12 weeks, as your liver functions under this new, healthier protocol, you begin to see a measurable, sustainable drop in liver enzymes like ALT and AST on a blood test.
Ah, actual proof on paper.
Exactly. A 30-day challenge might shift some water weight and glycogen, but 8 to 12 weeks is the actual metabolic window required for deep tissue healing.
And the guiding mantra for those 8 to 12 weeks is laid out beautifully in the source material. Simple, repeatable, sustainable.
You do not need perfection, you just need consistency.
So what does this all mean? Honestly, as someone who reads a lot of dense medical literature, I find this incredibly liberating.
It really is.
It is so freeing to look at the data and realize that an imperfect 8-week streak of just doing your best on either of these diets is scientifically vastly superior to a totally flawless, mathematically perfect 3-day streak where you're trying to optimize every single bite and then just burn out by Thursday.
This raises an important question, and it's one you, the listener, need to ask yourself right now. Which of these two frameworks realistically fits into your actual life for the next 2 months without making you absolutely miserable?
Yeah, you have to look at your reality. What does your family eat? What is your work schedule? What is your budget?
Right, because if you look at the lower carb approach and you know in your gut that you will resent every single meal, you won't last 8 weeks.
You'll quit on day 4.
Exactly. In that scenario, the plant-predominant approach is objectively the better medical choice for you, even if the lower carb model might theoretically reduce liver fat a tiny fraction faster in a sterile lab environment.
We don't live in a lab.
No, we don't. Adherence is the only metric that translates to real-world healing.
It has to fit your life. So let's pull all of this together and recap the core takeaways from today's deep dive. You have a very clear evidence-based map in front of you. First, make a decision. Choose your path. Either the whole food, lower carb approach to stabilize insulin, or the plant-predominant approach to reduce saturated fat.
Pick one.
Second, focus strictly on the specific whole foods that drive your chosen path. If you're going low carb, up your high-quality proteins and healthy fats to beat the cravings. If you're going plant-predominant, turn up the dial on legumes, vegetables, and intact grains.
And third, fiercely avoid the ultra-processed traps.
Right. Remember the health halo effect. A processed cookie is still a processed cookie, regardless of the green marketing on the box.
Absolutely.
And finally, commit fully, no matter how imperfectly, to that vital 8 to 12 week timeline to give your liver the biological window it actually needs to regenerate.
The power really is entirely in your hands now. The noise has been successfully cut. Those 50 confusing, screaming grocery store aisles have been narrowed down to just 2 clear, well-lit paths.
You have the knowledge. You just have to pick a lane and start walking.
You know, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. We spent this entire deep dive analyzing metabolic pathways and dietary frameworks, but think about the behavioral psychology of what the data just showed us. If an 8-week commitment of good enough consistency is scientifically proven to beat a week of an absolute perfect diet when it comes to healing a major organ. Wait, let me rephrase that. When it comes to healing a major organ, consistency beats perfection every time. So in what other areas of your life is your relentless pursuit of perfection actually the very thing preventing you from making real, measurable progress.
Wow, that is exactly it. Next time you find yourself standing frozen in that metaphorical grocery store aisle of life, completely overwhelmed by all the pressure to make the perfect choice, just grab the good enough option, put it in your cart, and keep moving forward. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.